They say there was a woman whose name frightened powerful men, not because she carried a weapon, not because she commanded an army, but because she asked one question. A question so dangerous that it ignited thousands of women across the land. Some say it began with a stranger carrying a notebook. Others insist it started with a whisper in the market. But the oldest women tell a different story. They say the night before everything changed. Someone left a palm leaf outside a widow's door. On it were 6 chilling words: keep quiet or your son disappears. Who left it? Why was one ordinary market woman being threatened? And what secret connected her to one of the greatest women's uprisings in African history? Tonight, by the moonlight, gather close, because this is the story they whispered from one generation to the next. The woman who counted the women. Welcome to Moonlight Tales Africa, a place where African stories come alive beneath the moonlight. Stories filled with wisdom, culture, emotion, humanity, and transformation. Here we journey through the heart of Africa, through village paths, moonlit memories, forgotten truths, silent struggles, and the powerful lessons hidden inside ordinary lives. So, wherever you are listening from, sit close, relax, and journey with me. Sit close to the fire. The elders are about to speak. Because some stories do more than entertain us, they help us understand ourselves. This is Moonlight Tales Africa.
Before we begin today's story, kindly subscribe and become part of this growing circle of African history, wisdom, culture, and moonlight tales. Sit close to the fire. The elders are about to continue their story.
The woman who counted the women. The first person to notice that something was wrong was not a chief. It was not a colonial officer. It was not even one of the village elders. It was an old woman who sold roasted yams at the edge of Oloko Market. She had watched that market for over 40 years. She could tell when a marriage was about to fail before the couple knew it themselves. She knew when a trader was lying about the weight of her gari, and she could tell from the way a stranger walked whether they had come to buy or to bring trouble. That morning, she stopped turning her yams over the fire. She looked towards the dusty road. 3 unfamiliar men were approaching. One carried a leather bag, another held a notebook. The third spoke quietly to a local messenger. The old woman muttered under her breath, "Something is following those men, and it is not good." Before noon, the whole market was buzzing. They say the white government is counting people. I heard they only want to know how many houses there are. No, they are counting goats. My husband said they are preparing new taxes. And when has a husband ever known everything? Another woman replied, drawing laughter from those nearby. Only one woman did not laugh, Adaugo, a young widow. She sold the finest palm oil in 3 neighboring villages. People often joke that if news entered Oloko, it stopped first at Adaugo's stall before traveling anywhere else. But today she hardly spoke. Her eyes kept drifting towards the narrow footpath leading into the market. She was waiting for someone, or perhaps hoping someone would not come. The evening before, just after darkness settled over the village, she had returned from fetching water. Outside her door lay a fresh palm leaf. No one in Oloko left a palm leaf at another person's entrance without reason. Her heart began to race. She bent down. Wrapped inside the leaf was a small piece of cloth. Written in charcoal were 6 words: "Keep quiet, or your son disappears." She looked around. Nothing. Only crickets, only darkness, and only silence. Yet someone had been standing there moments before. She hid the message beneath the cooking stones before her son, Chike, could see it. She barely slept. Now, as she sat in the market pretending to arrange bottles of palm oil, those 6 words echoed in her mind again and again. Who wanted her silence and about what? Just then, a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. Adaugo! It was Mama Urena, the oldest cloth trader in the market. My daughter, your hands are working, but your mind has traveled somewhere else.
Adaugo forced a smile.
I did not sleep well. Mama Urena narrowed her eyes. You are carrying something heavier than lack of sleep. Before Adaugo could answer, a young girl came running into the market. She was breathless. Her wrapper was covered in red dust. They've started, she shouted. Every conversation stopped. What has started? Someone asked. The counting. The crowd pressed closer. The government messenger went to Nwanyeruwa's compound. At the mention of that respected woman's name, everyone fell silent. The girl continued. He asked how many people lived in her household. Then he asked how many goats she owned. He asked how many sheep. And then the girl swallowed hard. He began asking about the women. A murmur swept through the market. What did Nwanyeruwa do? Someone asked. The girl lifted her head. She stood straight, looked him in the eye, and asked one question. The market became so quiet that even the crackling fire beneath the roasted yams could be heard. What question? Mama Irena whispered. The girl answered slowly. She asked, are you counting women so that you can tax us too? For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then an elderly woman struck her walking stick against the ground. Another woman tied her wrapper tightly around her waist. One by one, the women began covering their goods. The market had changed. This was no longer a place of buying and selling. It had become a place where a decision was about to be made. Adaugo looked across the market. Standing beneath an udala tree was her late husband's younger brother, Obinna. He was watching her. Not the crowd, not the messenger. Her. The moment their eyes met, he turned away and disappeared into the gathering people. A cold feeling settled in Adaugo's chest. Obinna had warned her 2 days earlier not to attend any women's meetings. Now the threat outside her door, his strange behavior, and the government's sudden counting, could they all be connected? As the women quietly left the market in small groups, Mama Urena leaned close to Adaugo and whispered, come to my compound after sunset. No lantern, no children, no men. Then she added words that would change Adaugo's life forever. Tonight, the women will decide whether fear rules us or we rule our fear. That night, Oloko seemed unusually quiet. No drums, no laughter from the courtyards, no women calling children home from the footpaths. Even the dogs appeared to understand that something was moving through the village, something serious. Adaugo waited until her son Chika had fallen asleep. Then she wrapped a dark cloth around her shoulders and stepped outside. She carried no lantern. Mama Urena had warned her. No light, no children, and no men. The moon was thin, barely strong enough to show the path beneath her feet. As Adaugo walked, she heard movement behind the trees. Women, some came alone. Others arrived in pairs, pretending not to know one another. No one spoke. They simply followed the same narrow path towards Mama Urena's compound. By the time Adaugo arrived, more than 30 women were gathered inside. Palm oil traders, farmers, widows, young wives, grandmothers. Women who often argued over market space were now sitting shoulder to shoulder. At the center of the courtyard stood Nwanyeruwa. She was calm, but her face showed that something serious had happened. Mama Urena closed the gate. Then she spoke. What was said here tonight must not leave this compound until we decide. A woman near the wall raised her hand. But the whole market already knows about the counting. Mama Urena shook her head. The market knows a rumor. We must know the truth. All eyes turned towards Nwanyeruwa. She stood. The man came to my compound carrying a notebook. Her voice was firm. He asked about the people in my household. He asked about my goats. He asked about my sheep. And when I questioned him, he spoke to me as though I were a child. The women murmured angrily. Nwanyeruwa lifted her hand and continued. I asked whether women would be taxed. What did he say? Someone called. He did not answer. That response angered the women even more. One woman stood. Why count what you do not intend to tax? Another added, first they count your goats, then they count your baskets. Soon they will count the air you breathe. Several women shouted in agreement, but Mama Urena raised her walking stick. Noise will not help us. We must think. Adaugo sat quietly at the edge of the gathering. She listened, but her mind kept returning to the palm leaf outside her door. Keep quiet, or your son disappears. She wondered whether the threat was connected to this meeting, and if it was, how did the sender know the women would gather? Nwanyeruwa looked around the courtyard. This is not only about counting. The women became silent. For months, people have complained about the warrant chiefs. They take more than they should. They punish those who question them. They hide behind the government. A woman spat into the dust. Chief Okugo has forgotten that he was born by a woman. Another replied, perhaps we should remind him. A low ripple of laughter passed through the courtyard, but it carried anger beneath it. Mama Urena leaned forward. We will send messages to the women in the surrounding villages. How? A young woman asked. The same way women have always sent messages. Through the market, through marriage ties, through songs, through daughters, through sisters, through women who carried palm oil from one village to another. No official messenger could travel faster than a determined market woman. The plan began to take shape. At dawn, one group would travel east, another would move towards the river settlements, others would carry the message to women in neighboring markets. The words would be simple. The women of Oloko were being counted. The women feared taxation, and the women would not remain silent. A young trader named Mbeke stood. What will we do when the women gather? Mama Urena answered. We will demand answers. And if they refuse, we will remain there. For how long? Mama Urena's eyes hardened. For as long as it takes. A murmur of approval spread through the courtyard. Then an elderly woman began to sing softly. It was an old women's song, a song used when a man had abused his power and refused to listen. Another woman joined her, then another. Soon the whole courtyard was singing. The song was not loud, but it was powerful. It spoke of a man who built a tall stool and forgot that women had carved the legs. It warned that a chief who closed his ears would one day hear the ground itself speaking. Adaugo felt the hairs rise on her arms. This was no ordinary meeting. Something had begun, something larger than any one woman, something the warrant chiefs did not yet understand. And then a sound came from outside the wall, a dry branch breaking. The singing stopped. Every face turned towards the gate. Mama Urena raised one finger to her lips. Silence. Another sound followed. Footsteps. Someone was moving behind the compound. Two women rushed towards the back entrance. Adaugo stood quickly. The gate was opened. A shadow darted between the trees. Stop! One woman shouted. Several women ran after the figure, but whoever it was knew the village well. The person disappeared into the darkness. Mama Urena ordered everyone back inside. No one leaves alone, she said. We have been heard. Fear moved through the courtyard. One woman whispered, perhaps it was only a child. Mama Urena stared at her. Children do not hide when women sing. Adaugo's heart began to pound. She looked towards the ground near the back wall. Something pale lay in the dust. She walked closer. It was a strip of cloth. She picked it up. Her breath caught. She knew that cloth. She had seen it many times around Obina's waist. Her late husband's brother had been listening. Adaugo closed her fingers around the cloth before anyone else noticed. She said nothing, but Mama Urena was watching her. "What did you find?" the old woman asked. "Nothing," Adaugo replied too quickly. Mama Urena's eyes narrowed. Before she could question her further, someone knocked urgently at the front gate. 3 times, then twice, then once. It was the women's signal. The gate opened. A messenger from the next village stumbled inside. She had traveled faster. Her breathing was uneven. "The message has already reached our market," she said. The women exchanged surprised looks. "But we have not sent anyone yet," Mama Urena replied. The messenger stared at them. "That is not all." She looked towards Nwanyeruwa. "Chief Okugo knows about this meeting." A heavy silence fell over the compound. "How?" someone asked. The messenger swallowed. "He has sent men to bring in the women he believes are leading it." Mama Urena tightened her grip on her walking stick. "Whose names?" The messenger began to speak. "Nwanyeruwa, Mama Urena." She hesitated. Then she looked directly at Adaugo. "And the widow who sells palm oil." Adaugo felt the cloth hidden in her hand. At that moment, the sound of men's voices rose from the road outside. Torches appeared between the trees. They were already coming. Mama Urena looked around the compound. Every woman must leave through the back. But Nwanyeruwa did not move. "No," she said. The women turned towards her. "If we run tonight, they will believe fear has already defeated us." The voices outside grew louder. A fist struck the gate. "Open in the name of Chief Okugo." Nobody answered. The gate shook again. Adaugo looked at the gathered women. Then she looked towards the room where Mama Urena stored her farming tools. A decision formed in her mind. She stepped forward. "I will open the gate." Mama Urena grabbed her arm. "Have you lost your senses?" Adaugo slowly opened her hand. Inside, it was the strip of cloth. "This belongs to the man who listened outside." Mama Urena recognized it. "Obina?" Adaugo nodded. Then came another blow against the gate. This time, the wooden bar began to crack. Adaugo looked at Nwanyeruwa. "If Obina has betrayed us, then they already know enough." "What are you planning?" Nwanyeruwa asked. Adaugo turned towards the gate. "I am going to give them the woman they came for." Before anyone could stop her, the wooden bar split. The gate burst open and the men entered. The gate burst open. 4 men entered Mama Urena's compound carrying torches and heavy walking sticks. Behind them stood Obina. Adaugo's heart sank. So it was true. Her late husband's brother had betrayed them. One of the men stepped forward. "Which of you is Adaugo, the palm oil seller?" No woman answered. The man raised his voice. "Chief Okugo has ordered us to bring her, Nwanyeruwa, and the old cloth trader." Mama Urena planted her walking stick firmly in the ground. "This old cloth trader has a name." The man ignored her. Adaugo stepped out from among the women. "I am Adaugo." A murmur moved through the courtyard. Mama Urena reached for her arm, but Adaugo gently pulled away. The leader looked pleased. "At least one woman here has sense." Adaugo stared at him. "You came for me. Here I am." The man pointed towards the gate. "Walk." Adaugo did not move. "First tell me why Chief Okugo wants a widow who sells palm oil." The man laughed. "You women have gathered to cause trouble." "We gathered to ask questions." Questions become trouble when women forget their place. A sharp sound rose from the courtyard. Several women hissed. Mama Urena lifted her walking stick. "And who gave you the authority to decide a woman's place?" The man turned towards her. "Old woman, keep quiet." Mama Urena smiled. "My son, if age has taught me anything, it is that a man usually demands silence when he has no good answer." The women murmured in agreement. The man's expression hardened. Take all three of them. The others moved forward, but Adaugo raised her hand. Wait! She turned towards Obinna. He had remained near the gate, avoiding her eyes. Brother, she said, look at me. Obinna did not move. Look at me. Slowly he raised his head. Adaugo opened her hand and showed him the strip of cloth she had found outside the compound. You listened behind the wall. Obinna's face changed. The men glanced at him. Adaugo continued. You told Chief Okugo about this meeting. Obinna swallowed. I had no choice. There is always a choice. You do not understand. Then explain it. The leader interrupted. We did not come here for family arguments. But Obinna suddenly spoke. They threatened me. Adaugo stared at him. With what? My land. The women fell silent. Obinna's voice shook. Chief Okugo said he would take my farm if I did not report what the women were planning. Adaugo felt anger rise within her. So you chose your farm over us? I chose survival. Mama Urena struck the ground with her stick. A man who saves his farm by selling his people will one day discover that the land remembers. Obinna looked ashamed. Then Adaugo remembered the message left outside her door. Did you also threaten my son? Obinna looked confused. What threat? The palm leaf. I left no palm leaf. Adaugo studied his face. For the first time that night she believed him. She turned towards the men. Then one of you did. Nobody answered. The leader looked away. That was enough. Adaugo stepped closer. You entered my compound at night. You threatened my child. Now you stand here speaking of authority. The man tightened his grip on his stick. Be careful, woman. No, Adaugo replied. You should be careful. The women moved closer behind her, one step and then another. The men suddenly appeared smaller. Nwanyeruwa came forward. You came to take 3 women. She looked around the crowded courtyard. But you will have to take all of us. The women answered together, all of us. The words filled the compound. The leader glanced towards the gate. Outside another sound had begun, singing. Soft at first, then stronger. Women from the neighboring compounds were approaching. They carried no weapons. Some held lanterns. Some carried wooden spoons, baskets, and walking sticks. Others came with babies tied to their backs. The road outside Mama Urena's compound filled with women. The message had traveled faster than fear. A voice rose from the darkness. If you take one woman, you take every woman. Another answered, if you silence one market, 10 markets will speak. The men looked at one another. They had expected frightened widows and traders. They had not expected a village. Mama Urena moved towards the gate. Go back to Chief Okugo, the leader tried to appear confident. And tell him what? Tell him the women are coming. The courtyard erupted in song. It was the same old song they had sung earlier, but now it thundered through the village. It spoke of a chief who climbed too high and forgot the hands that built his stool. It warned that power without justice would eventually fall. The men backed towards the gate. The leader pointed at Adaugo. This is not finished. Adaugo met his eyes. No, it is only beginning. They left. Obinna remained behind. For a moment, nobody spoke to him. Then he removed the cloth from around his waist and placed it on the ground. I am sorry, he said. Adaugo looked at him. Sorry does not erase betrayal. I know, but truth is where repair begins. Obinna nodded. Mama Urena turned to the women. We leave at first light. For where? Someone asked. To the chief's compound. And if he refuses to listen? Mama Urena's eyes hardened. Then we will sit there until his ears open. By sunrise, the women were ready. But it was no longer only the women of Oloko. They came from neighboring villages, from farms, from riverside settlements. from crowded markets and distant compounds. They came in twos, in tens, in hundreds. The women sang as they walked. Some danced, some clapped, some called out the names of chiefs who had abused their authority. Their method was old and powerful. When a man had behaved shamefully, the women could gather at his home, sing against him, mock his wrongdoing, and refuse to leave until he answered them. The men called it disturbance. The women called it correction. By the time they reached the chief's compound, the road behind them was covered with dust. Chief Okugo appeared at the entrance. He looked at the crowd and tried to hide his fear. "Why have you gathered here?" Nwanyeruwa stepped forward. "You know why. There is no tax on women." "Then say it clearly." "I have already said it." "Say it before everyone." Chief Okugo looked at the sea of faces. The women waited. Adaugo noticed the same government messenger who had questioned Nwanyeruwa standing behind the chief. He still carried his notebook. Adaugo pointed at it. "You came to count us." The messenger frowned. "It was an assessment." "For what purpose?" He hesitated, and that hesitation moved through the crowd like fire through dry grass. The women began to shout, "Answer! Tell us! Why were women being counted?" Chief Okugo raised both hands. "There will be no tax on women." The shouting continued. "And the warrant chiefs who take what does not belong to them? And the punishments? And the intimidation? And the threats?" Adaugo's voice rose above the others. "And the men who enter a widow's compound at night and threaten her child?" The crowd became still. Chief Okugo looked towards his men. No one met his eyes. Adaugo stepped forward. "You believed fear would silence one woman." She pointed behind her. "Look at what fear has gathered." The chief looked at the women filling the road. For the first time, he understood. This was no longer about one notebook, one widow, one chief, or even one village. The women had discovered the strength of their collective voice. And once a people discover that strength, it is difficult to make them forget it. Messages continued to travel from Oloko to Aba, from one market to another. Women gathered in large numbers to challenge warrant chiefs, native courts, and colonial authority. They sang, they danced, they demanded change. What began with the counting of a household grew into something the authorities had never imagined: a women's war, not a war fought with guns. A war fought with courage, organization, unity, and voices that refused to be dismissed. In the days that followed, Adaugo became known across the markets, not because she had led every gathering, not because she was the loudest woman, but because people remembered the widow who had been threatened into silence and chose to speak instead. Years later, when children asked how the uprising began, different people told different stories. Some said it began when Nwanyeruwa challenged the man who came to count her household. Some said it began in the markets. Others said it began with the anger women had carried for many years. But in Oloko, the old women told another version. They said it began the night someone left a palm leaf outside a widow's door. The threat had been meant to frighten her. Instead, it became evidence of how afraid powerful men had become of ordinary women. And whenever Adaugo was asked why she had opened the gate that night, she gave the same answer: "I opened it because I finally understood." "What did you understand?" the children would ask. Adaugo would smile. "That sometimes the person outside the gate is not the one with the power." She would point towards the market where women still argued, traded, laughed, and carried news from one village to another. The power belongs to those who stand together behind it. History would later remember the uprising of 1929 by many names. Some colonial records called it a riot, but the women remembered it differently. They called it Ogu Umunwanyi, the Women's War. And by the moonlight, the elders still remind us, when one woman speaks, she may be ignored.
But when thousands of women speak together, even history must listen.
The end.
Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like, comment, and share so you won't miss our future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.